Hello. Welcome to Finsweet Live. Today is Build Day, Friday, 9 a.m. Eastern with Alex. Alex is the CTO of Finsweet, and he does a lot of technical things. And today we're talking about tips for managing custom Webflow apps. And Alex is a really good person to talk to about this because he's built many web apps for clients, for Finsweet internally, and we manage all of our web apps through Webflow. This is we're not creating React apps separately from Webflow. We are building our web apps in Webflow. So this episode is all about tips for better managing web apps. Now, this doesn't mean super big, giant web apps all the time, right? This could be a little tiny web application, and all the principles that we're talking about in this episode will apply to that. So I think will be a valuable episode for everybody. Alex, how are you doing? How are you excited for this episode?
I am great, and I'm excited for that, especially because it's been a while that I have been presenting stuff, but we never talked about client work actually, or things that you could be building that potentially can affect clients in what you're doing. And I have pretty much a lot of experience recently because I've been working on super big projects with some clients. So I think that some of these tips will apply to a lot of people, but not only for people who are building, like you said, super big complex stuff. I mean, anything that goes from just one line of JavaScript, I'm sure that you can find something valuable from this. There's always ways to improve your workflow and the ways that you're building stuff, and especially in Webflow, which is a platform that's very specific. It has its own user base with it. They have their own necessities with this, and we need to treat them accordingly. So, and this is one of the biggest topics that I want to address today. So yeah, it will be super nice.
It will be different because when people talk about web apps, they're usually talking about how to build applications in more traditional ways. How to build with React, how to build with Vue, how to build these things outside of Webflow. But we're really talking about how to take advantage of Webflow as a platform, something that we already know, something that we already love, and just how to take that to the next level. And let's say hello to everybody in the audience. I love seeing all the people come back every week, our technical crew. Let's bring up these people. Hello, Demetrius. Welcome back. We have Mika. Always great to have you. Spencer from Minneapolis. Hello. Welcome. Josh Hartman. How you doing? Nice. Joel Whitaker. Great. Yes. This is a heavy technical audience here. I love it. Michael Rose, welcome. Hello. Belmont, hello. Yes, it's Friday. Yes, feels good. Technical all day. Hello, Rhino. And let's bring up a few more. Duncan Prince, hello. And we have Harold and Simone. Nice. Okay, that's it for the hellos. Always, it's great that you come. We love seeing our repeat viewers every Friday because we know that after X amount of months, we're going to be seeing some web apps. We're going to be seeing more technical work from everybody that is coming to this. So I love that. Okay, so Alex, give us a little preview. What are we talking about today? Down to more of the specifics.
Okay. Yeah. So what I would like to focus today is on discussing, when you're trying to build something custom in Webflow, there are many use cases. It could be something very simple, like just a couple lines of JavaScript, as I said. That's something that is just tweaking a functionality on the side. But maybe it's a client that requires a full blown application that it's built in Webflow, right? But the thing is that people come to Webflow for one reason. Well, they come to Webflow for many reasons, but the main reason, especially that big companies are coming to Webflow, is because their marketing teams, the people who are managing the projects, they want the freedom that they get from a platform like Webflow. You have your own project here that you don't need any JavaScript developer or web developer in general to be managing that project for you. You can jump in the designer, you can start tweaking stuff, and it speeds up the development process a lot. But that being a benefit for many people, it comes with a price when we're trying to build custom stuff in Waffle, because usually this involves having to think on ways on how clients can potentially break what you built. That's so I love trying to think on that every project should always be built client proof, not idiot proof, but client proof. So when the client jumps in the project, they're not going to be breaking everything in one go. And aside from that, also, Webflow, it's very specific. The way that we build in Webflow, it's not the same that you would be in other platforms or environments. You're not building component based like you would do in a framework like Java, with React. You're not coding everything from scratch, so you don't have the issues of the limited UX of the Waffle designer. You have built-in components that Waffle provides. You have many things that are not something that are a thing outside of Webflow. It's Webflow. It is what it is. It provides what it does, and what we want to do is build the best we can with what we got. That's the main idea. So yeah, I think that we have a bunch of tips that we can share about that.
That's great. And I've heard you say before, don't fight Webflow, use Webflow.
Yeah.
This is a great concept, that when you're building a web application, you're using what the platform has to offer natively. You're not fighting every single part of the platform and just kind of working around it, right? This is
Yep.
so important. And I think it leads to that proper maintainability, because sometimes we're
Mm-hmm.
handing off a web app to a development team. Usually we're not, but sometimes we are. Usually we are handing it off to a marketing team, to a team that wants to be able to use Webflow for the reason they started using Webflow, to manage design, to manage styles, to manage layouts. So how can we build a web application that lets people still use Webflow for what Webflow is intended for?
Mm-hmm.
And this is your
Yep.
mentality of use Webflow, don't fight Webflow.
But it's still, even if we were delivering the project to a technical team, that technical team, it's probably not familiar with Webflow still. It might
Sure.
be a technical team of engineers that they are building their own software and they don't know anything about Webflow. So also, this is something that I would like to touch later. But the platform, it's very specific. So whenever you're delivering this project, you need to make sure that the end user of that project will understand what's happening there, what is going on, and if they do something in the project, what side effects could that action have, etc. So yeah, I think that we can start talking about a few tips that I already have written down, and maybe later if people has questions or somebody wants to suggest something that we missed, please do. Do we have any questions so far, or should we kind of start?
Let's go for it. And as always,
Cool.
everybody in the audience, if you have questions while we're talking, please ask those questions. We're bringing up the most relevant questions to the topics we're talking about. So ask them in the comments, and we'll stop every so minutes and we will answer those. But yeah, let's get started.
Nice. Okay, so time to share my screen. I think that we can start mentioning a few things with that. And the first one that I would like to start with, it's what we mentioned, that the project should be client proof. And this reminds me a lot of the client first mentality. in a sense that we want to make sure that people understand what's going on, and it's harder to break when somebody jumps in. um, so imagine that you build something. We'll do it now. We'll make a quick example. You're building something like, can we think of something very simple? Let's say, for example, we want to display today's date. That's it. Somehow, we have an article, we have something, we have a timer, and we want to display today's date. Actually, let's do it. I can do it while we talk. Let's just put a, and we'll just say day is this, whatever. Okay, so imagine that we want to code this, and obviously we need to add some JavaScript in place. The first thing that you will think of is, okay, we have here this paragraph, we have this span that we could be wrapping in here, and now we know that this span is the one that I want to add the today's date on, right? So everything is cool. You build that. Let's style this. Let's say, I don't know, date, today date, whatever, because we want to make this bold and not position. We want to make this bold and perhaps a little bit bigger. I don't know, like that. And now that we're ready, we start coding this. And the way that many people would code it is, okay, I just need to query this element and then just get today's date and put it in there, and that's it. So let's do it. Let's just make something very simple. Let's say, whoops, let's say that today's date element, query selector, and in here many people would rely already on just, okay, we have this class that it's today date, so that's good enough for me. So let's do it. I'll just say, okay, the class that's today date, I'll get this, and then I'll just say that the date element, the text content, it should be the new date for today, the string. Okay, and if we do this will work. I mean, nothing complex at all. We're just doing this. But now we are ready. Okay, this is not the best way we could show it, but it's working. But now think of the client that's going to come to this project. Somebody just comes in here and says, okay, but you know what? I don't want to display today's date here. I just want to display it somewhere else. So I'll copy this and I'll paste it in another paragraph like this, and the client doesn't know what's going on. So in that case, perhaps it didn't break, but now it's not located in line. So I want to tweak the style, and I'll change these, and I'll say, I don't know, this is big date, because I want to put this like super big. You know, this is something that could happen. The client, it just sees this Waffle designer, and they know that they have full freedom of tweaking stuff, so they just did it. But what happened now? Everything broke. Because the element, it's no longer called today date. This element, it's now changed. The class for that is big date, and if it publishes, we're not getting an error. And obviously, this is a very small example, but imagine that this happens in the middle of a big application that it's a source of revenue of the client. Maybe it's a form that's getting leads, something like that. It just breaks. And now you're getting calls from the client that, what the hell, this is not working, So the first thing that we need to be aware is clients will always change stuff. They will always take something that you built and they will try to change it. They will try to change the styles. They will try to change the class names. They will change the layouts. They will move elements around, things like that, because this is the main power of Webflow. This is what they can do. So knowing that, we can build our code preparing against this. We can already foresee that this is going to happen and just prepare the code to avoid these kind of situations. So the first recommendation that I will always give to everyone is that never use class names when you're building stuff with custom code. Never, because it just takes this, and now I just broke my code. Any small renaming, it's breaking everything. So one of the things that is a little bit safer, not 100%, but we'll get to that later. Um, it's just using attributes, for example. Because attributes is something that most clients, they don't even know about it, so that's a good thing. But other than that, an attribute is something that will not affect the output of the Waffle designer most of the time. There are some attributes that can, but most of the time it's not going to affect anything. It's not depending on the layouts, the styles, anything like that. So in that case, we know that an attribute is going to be safer. So we can do something like that. We could say, for example, if as element, we have our own naming convention for attributes, which I recommend that you do. And we can say that this is date. And that's it. So this is one first step that it's really that we're already now foolproofing any class name changes. So if we change the code and now we say as element and this is date, they should work now. Yeah, now it works. The cool thing about this is that they can move it around. It doesn't matter. They can change the class name. It doesn't matter. It's not going to break. But still, it can break for now. You know what? Because clients can also delete this, right? I'm just tired about this date element. I don't want to show it anymore. So I'm going to delete it. And next thing you're seeing now, it's a bug, an error caused because this element is no longer existing. So now the code here it's failing. So another thing, another recommendation that I give you is that always think that an element might not be there, because somebody can just press delete and that's it. Right now it doesn't matter because this code, if it fails, it's just the date. It won't show anyways. But imagine that this code it's relying in the middle of a bigger script, and because of this element missing, now the entire script just threw an error and it broke. So what we have to do is, instead of assuming that this element is always going to be there, let me zoom out one, we can say, okay, this element might not be there. What do I do if it's not there? So if there is no date element, for example, in this case, I'll just say, hey, put it back. And that's it. And we will return. Because now we know that something happened. And this is a very extreme case, an example. But what you should be doing is handling the situation where this element is not there. What do I do? Should I stop everything? Should I console log the error and that's it? Should I provide an alternative? Like if this element does not exist, then don't do this specific action, but keep doing the rest of the actions in the logic. You should be thinking about that. And one thing that it's very helpful for noticing these kind of potential bugs is obviously using TypeScript. This is something that I recommend a lot in every single stream. I think that we've mentioned it, because TypeScript is going to complain when something might not be there. I think that we don't need to talk about TypeScript, because I feel that I'm being super repetitive. But with TypeScript, basically, if I don't do this, TypeScript is complaining, because it's saying, okay, be careful, because this element it might not be there. You're trying to query, but it might not be there. So you will get a lot of help if you go that route, if you use TypeScript. Okay, so now we have the basics. Go ahead, Joe. I saw you wanted to say something.
Yes, and also we'll bring up some comments as well.
Yeah.
We don't use classes to communicate with our JavaScript ever at Finsweet. Since Alex
No.
came on, since we built cookie consent, which was 100% attributes based, that was kind of the turning point where we said, hey, everything can use attributes. We can always
Mm-hmm.
communicate using attributes. So even for the smallest script like this, like displaying the date, we are using attributes for that target. Also, how Webflow manages classes. You can run into
Mm-hmm.
rewrite issues going from project to project. You can accidentally clear classes from the project. There are so many UX issues with classes when you're talking about web applications and Webflow.
Yep.
With attributes, you don't get that. There's no rewriting of attributes. Webflow Designer kind of leaves them alone. And
Mm-hmm.
like you said, they're kind of hidden, which makes it a little bit more client safe. That hidden aspect
Yeah.
it's great for us. Let's bring up a comment from Demetrius. I'm stuck in this step now, so basic yet important. I want to refactor my mini Passion app from scratch, and I've bound everything to classes.
Mm.
So when you bound an entire application to classes, that means you're kind of locked into that class naming. And that's
Yep.
just not Webflow is made to like quickly create, edit, duplicate, change classes and styles. That's the beauty of it. So, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Demetrius, next app, go for those attributes. And
Or
let's bring up
refactor that
something
one
from
also.
or refactor it. Yeah, you probably
Yeah.
should. It's worth it. Let's bring this up from Josh and let's talk about this for a minute or two. Josh Hartman says, generally speaking, what Alex is talking about, it's difficult to bring myself to allow clients to work directly with things in Webflow Designer. I make in fear
Mm-hmm.
of them breaking and poor version control. So, yes, this idea of I don't want my clients to ever touch Webflow Designer. And you know what? In a perfect world, they don't, right? It would be great if a client said, hey, you're going to build our app and we're just going to pay you every month to manage it. And we don't want to touch it. This is great
Mm-hmm.
for us. We like this. But we're ready to work with any company that says, I want you to build my application and then we're going to manage it and the marketing team, maybe some of our developers will touch it, and we're just going to take it over and we'll let you know if we need any help. So, Alex, can we give Josh some words of wisdom to help really hand off this project and be a little bit more confident that clients can edit it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would like to mention that every single time that we get a client request that involves big development efforts, I mean, custom development efforts, we always assess how complex it's going to be to build that. And we make sure that the client understands the upsides and downsides of having an application like that in Webflow. Because everything that I'm telling you today, they don't need to be aware of every single detail, but they need to be aware that developing a web application in Webflow, it's harder than usual. I mean, you can always pull a React, a Vue, Svelte application and just build something quick and that's it. But Webflow, it's providing a series of benefits, and they need to take that balance and try to make a decision. Do we go with Webflow, where we will have full design control, we will be able to manage all the content without relying on engineers, but at the same time we will have some restrictions, we'll probably need to do a little bit of learning before touching anything, and we'll get to that in a second. um, or we just, okay, we don't use Waffle and we go for another route. This is something that you should always do. That being said, if the client wants to go with Webflow, obviously there are a few things that you can do. The first one is what we think right now, making sure that the project is client proof. But we have a few more tips that we will be discussing during the stream. Documenting everything, trying to not encapsulate logic in Webflow, making sure that the client is aware when there is some specific, let's call it hack, or something that it relies on a specific structure, making sure that the client understands that, etc. So it's a hard decision, I know, but in my experience, all the clients that we have created something for, they have been happy with the benefits that Waffle provided, even though the development was way more complex than it should have been if we just build that with a traditional JavaScript framework. There's always a client who will appreciate that, and I'm sure that you will find that. I don't know if I missed something, but yeah. One last thing: always feel confident of declining a project if you think that the client it's not going to treat it the way that you expect, or if you think that it's not worth the hassle. There's always this balance that you need to assess. We turn down a lot of projects in Finsweet. We do. um so yeah, I think that this is like a complete separate stream topic, but these are my 2 cents.
And the documentation, Josh, I think is a great way to make
Documentation.
sure that you're at least communicating what they need to know about the application. If you just hand over an app and hope for the best, it may not always turn out well. But if you give really good documentation, it's on them now. It's not on you, right? And even if you're doing like a Zapier flow, right? Let's step aside from custom code here. You're doing a Zapier flow, or you're using Webflow logic or anything. Creating that documentation for a handoff is going to always help with the handoff. And I think we do documentation for pretty much every technical project, right, Alex? This is now something we
Every
charge
single
for.
time.
This is a line item on the invoice. If you want this kind of application built, we're going to do it for you, but you also have to pay for this really nice technical documentation that comes with it. And yeah, you have to document applications or they're just prone to breaking and not understanding why it's broken.
Documenting and having sessions, training sessions with the client, we'll see that. But if you build something custom with them that requires a specific way of adding data or building the layouts for a landing page, whatever, you need to do some training also. So expect having some meetings with the client. Maybe they have doubts. Maybe they try to do it once and they cannot make it work. They just they're saying that this is not working. You can expect this to happen a lot. So yeah, documentation, training, and making the project foolproof as much as you can. This is the best combination that you can do. And so far, it's worked great for us. I encourage you that you try it. For real. I mean, I don't want anybody to leave this stream thinking, "Oh man, building something custom in Webflow, it's not something that I want to do," because it's not worth it. That's not my thought at all. I think it's worth it because Waffle has so many benefits that other platforms don't provide. Yeah, especially for big companies with marketing teams and stuff like that. But anyways, shall we continue, or do we have any other questions?
Let's continue.
Okay, cool. Before switching topics to another tip, I want to continue with this, making sure that you're making it as easier as possible for the client when you deliver this project. So the next thing that I wanted to show you is, so let's imagine right now that we have a list, and for now I'll just put 1 people here. We have a list of people, and this list needs to be populated with external data. It needs to be populated on the request based on user interactions, whatever. And let's add a random class. Let's say cool list item, like that. So we can do, I don't know, let's make it red, for example. That's it. So many traditional people who has not worked with Webflow, the first thing that they might think of is, okay, I'll target the list. So let's say if it's element names list, and then they jump in the code and they hardcode stuff. So let's pick the list element, and let's say square selector, and this was a fez element. I forgot the name already. Cool names list. List, I think. Make sure that the list element exists. So let's say that if there's no list element, we'll just return. And now people, what they do is, okay, we have a bunch of names. Let's put a bunch of names. I love putting names from people from the stream. Say, okay, Mika. I apologize if I don't pronounce your name correctly. I'm sorry. Joel, Josh, I'm seeing from here, and also Simone, like that. And we want to put every single of these names in this list, right? We just want to replicate this list. I've seen many times people just saying, okay, so what I will do is for its name of the names, I'll just create a new element. So they probably say something like, okay, list element, and they want to append. No, let's say insert JSON HTML, something that they do a lot, and before the end, and they say, okay, so now I'll just put a list element like that, and this will be the name, like that. So what they do is they hard code stuff in the project, because right now what I'm doing is, sorry for the people who doesn't understand JavaScript, what I'm doing is I'm just looping through the names, and for each name I'm creating a list item, an HTML list item, and I'm going to append it, what I'm appending it in the list element. And that kind of works. It should work anyways if I publish this code, obviously. That kind of works because, we're just picking the list and we're appending everything. The problem is that when you start to hard code stuff, look what happened, for example. Why is that the Joe element has the red color, but the rest of items don't have? Because I've hard coded this HTML, so now it's not using the classes. But I could just, what if I add the class name myself? We could do it. We could say cool name. What's the name? Cool list item. I can put the class list here, and this will work. That's fine. But now the client renames a class. So now you need to go to the JavaScript project and you need to change the hard-coded HTML to make sure that the new class is the one that it's in here, for example, or maybe the client now decides that they don't, not only they want to show the name, but also they want to show the name plus an icon, something like that. Now you need to change again your code because you need to include that icon in every single item, So one thing that I recommend a lot is never hard code stuff in your custom code for Webflow. Just pick something that already exists on the page and work with that. Because an alternative to what we just did here is, okay, instead of hard coding this, what I'm going to do is I'll pick the first item. So let's say we'll add an attribute just to make sure that we keep following conventions, and we'll say coolest item like that. Obviously, so now we know that we have an item in here that it's item template, for example. And inside the list element, we want the query selector, and we want to say FS element. But this is coolest item, I think it was like that. So now we have this item template, and we can do is, instead of injecting this hard-coded HTML, let's pick the template element and let's just replicate it, right? We can just work with that. So what I'll do exactly that. I'll just say, okay, the new item is going to be the item template, and we will clone the node. True. And actually, we need to say that the item template needs to exist. And this new item, we can work with it. Oops, text content, and we will put the name on it. And in the list element, we will append this. So let me explain what we just did now. We're looping for all the through all the elements, but for each name, now what we're saying is take the template. So the template, remember that it's this item that we have in here. Clone it, change the name from that template, and then append it to a list. You know, because now everything works as expected, but with the addition that, okay, what if, for example, we decide to change the class name. It will work still because we're picking that item, and no matter what changes it has, we're applying the text content to it. So if it works, it should still work, and we can see that all of them, they have these weird CSS class. It doesn't matter. Client proof, foolproof. Nobody can now change this and complain that it's not working as expected. Um, let's put it back. Cool. Okay. Wow, it's been already half an hour, and I think I have so many things to talk about. But yeah.
Well, let's talk about this hard coding concept. This is something we see so much from new people joining our team. We're now
Mm-hmm.
trying to get more JavaScript developers at Finsweet, and a lot of them come from outside of Webflow, or most do.
Mm.
And we see people doing this hard coding method, which isn't wrong, right? It's not technically wrong, but it's fighting against Webflow and the native capabilities and the native purpose of the platform. And that's why in the beginning we said that we should work with Webflow, don't fight against Webflow. Something
Yeah.
like this. Now, when I think it's safe to say that you shouldn't hard code any HTML for Webflow, right?
No,
Alex, is that a
nothing.
good way?
Never.
Like, never. There's never a reason to code, like actually write HTML inside Webflow, whether that's inside the JavaScript file, whether that's inside an embed block. Like, it drives
Well,
me
an
nuts when
embed
I
block
see.
kind of see when you need an HTML tag that it's not available in Waffle, but that's a separate
Okay.
topic.
Yeah. When it's not
Yeah.
available in Webflow, but we're talking in the context of creating a list item. I have seen JavaScript developers have the finished functionality, but they're hard coding HTML in the embed block. This is a huge no. This is working against Webflow as a platform. So, anybody who's doing that, be clear. There's just a better way to do it. And what Alex just showed is such a better way to do it. It's working with Webflow.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. And I think that we can share one last tip about using the platform. Well, I actually have a few more, but related to this, of not hard coding stuff on the project. And it's use the CMS, because the CMS can help you a lot to avoiding hard coding stuff. And I don't want to get into specifics for the project that we just built, but it's a client that requires a lot of different messages that needs to be displayed on the page based on user inputs. So if the user is from this type, we need to show this. If the user has made a mistake on this form, we need to show this error. If the user has, taken the wrong path when submitting something, we need to show that error. Or if something failed when we were fetching from the API, we have a specific error that we want to manage from the CMS. The CMS is very powerful when you need to manage things like data, any kind of data that otherwise you would be hard coding in the custom code. And one example that we just did before is, so I had this alert here, and this alert was saying missing list. Okay, and that's fine. I mean, it's just a random alert. Oops, I need to delete something. Let's delete the list. This is just a random alert that I hard coded here. But imagine somehow I want to display a proper error with specific wording that the marketing team wants to be able to manage. The best way that we can do that, it's from the CMS. So for example, we could create collection list called errors, you know, and instead of hard coding a message here, I could add a method. Perhaps we don't have time to talk about that, but just pull the data from the CMS. We can discuss that in another topic, and use that data to show the message, you know. And next, everything can be managed now by the marketing team, even things that could end up being hard coded in the project. Now they're not. Um, Let me check because I
Let's
have an
bring up
outline
this
here.
comment
Yeah,
from
go ahead.
Josh while you're bringing something up here. Josh Hartman says, "I usually add a dynamic list with all items included
Mm-hmm.
styled HTML and then work with that in the DOM. All the benefits of Webflow with minimal JavaScript needed." So this is the mentality that Webflow is giving us the ability to display this list, to manage this list of content in the CMS, and then once it's in the DOM, we can do whatever we want with it. That the information is not coming from a JavaScript file, it's coming from native within the platform. And this is now building natively with Webflow, not against Webflow.
Mm-hmm.
So Josh, this is the mentality, this is what we're talking about. And yeah, Alex, is this what you're going to show?
Yeah, I mean, Josh had
Nice.
great idea. This is what we're doing. I'm not going to show it because I need to explain, you know, how to put the data, how to query it, side effects that you could have, things like that. But perhaps we could take it for another stream. Because right now I would like to jump in to another topic that it's very important for me, and I've noticed that it's very important also for the clients, specifically the ones that are going to take over a complex project. Do we have any other questions? No, right?
That's
I
it
can
for
just
now. Yeah,
continue.
let's go.
Okay. So one thing that you should try to avoid, and this is specific to Webflow, is so when okay let's take a step back. So when you're developing an application in somewhere like, let's call it React, so Value, whatever framework, you just have a code base, and that's it. You know, everything that is happening on that application, it's on that code base. You have the components, you have the styles, you have the HTML, the logic, the API calls, well, the logic for querying the API, everything on a single code base. Now, when we jump into developing in Webflow, we now have a problem. We have two different places where the project is living. We have the Waffle project it consists, let's call it the Waffle designer. It contains the front end, basically all the HTML, the styles, and potentially the logic. But at the same time, we have a separate code base that contains extra logic, extra bits of things that are supposed to be working together with the platform. Now, where I want to what I mean is, we're now looking at two different places at the same time to understand something. And this can lead into many complexities and many misunderstandings on how something should work. And let me put an example. Let me, super quick. So imagine that we have, let me call a blog post like that, create a collection. Let's just add 5 items like that. It'll be okay. Anyways, I don't want to wait for that. So imagine that we have a bunch of blog posts, and with the JavaScript code, we're interacting with them. But at the same time, because we want to avoid flashes or things like that, we have also an embed on the page with some extra JavaScript that needs to be in that specific place to interact with the blog posts, things like that. You know, when you try to be smart, you're just complicating everything. Because now somebody who's going to look in the code base thinking, okay, I can query all the blog posts and it's going to be fine. It might work, but maybe, you know, in the page I also added a script that deletes the blog posts if you're not an admin. I don't know. I mean, the application could be very complex. And I think that I'm explaining this example so bad, but stay with me.
Can
Um,
oh,
no, no, go ahead, go ahead.
sorry, keep I was going to ask, is this like having 2 sources of truth?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay.
Um,
Because I know aside from the technical side, something that we really try to never do at Finsweet is have 2 sources with the same
mm-hmm,
information or 2 separate platforms managing the same process. So,
mm-hmm,
like, keep it all in Notion or keep it all in Slack. Like, don't give me this
mm-hmm,
half and half where some information is living in here and some information is living in here, and you have to cross view this. When there's
mm-hmm.
too many sources of truth, it becomes confusing. Things get outdated. Things are not as yet recent as the other version. And it's a huge loss and it's a huge use of our resources. So is this
Yep.
similar here?
Yes, it is. And I think I came up with a better example. So imagine, for example, we have a form, and when you submit the form, you want to trigger an interaction, right? To build that, you need to have in the Webflow project, you need to have your form, you need to have the interaction, you need to have some hidden element somewhere tied to the interaction. So you can click on that element, so it will fire the interaction. All of that is living in Webflow. And at the same time, you have your own code base with a JavaScript that says, okay, when the form is submitted, go ahead, search for the div that it's hidden and click it. So it's going to trigger the interaction. Now, think of somebody who comes fresh in the project. They don't know Webflow. You just deliver that project to a technical team and they say, okay, cool. Let's see the code base for that. And they see that there's just some code that it's saying when the form is submitted, click a random div. And that's it. So now you have the logic it's split in two different places. You need to understand that there's a hidden div with an interaction that it's put in there, and that div needs to be on the page if you want to trigger an interaction. And at the same time, you need to know that, okay, and this form is also using some JavaScript that it's living on the code base, that it's listening for the form submission and things like that. Um, this is a situation that you will find a lot when developing for Webflow, because as we said, we want to work with the platform, right? So we want to take advantage of everything that provides, meaning interactions, classes, whatever the platform provides. But we need to make sure that we are always documenting when something is split so people can find it. Well, first of all, we should try to avoid it as much as we can. So we should try to avoid having logic in the designer when you can just have it in the code base, for example, things like that. But when it's inevitable, you need to make sure that somebody who's going to come in the project will understand, okay, this relies on the Webflow project having an interaction on a div element that when it gets the first click, it triggers an interaction. You know, it's very important that people understands the full picture of the project. And this is go ahead. I'll have some more thoughts for later. I think you made it.
Oh, there was a question earlier about how we manage that documentation. So let's say
Uh huh.
you have the logic in 2 places, a little bit outside, a little bit inside, and now what do you use to document that in real time as you're building? And then what does that
Hmm.
look like when you deliver it to the client?
I would say that so when something is very specific to a piece of code, that should be in the code. You can use comments for that. I'm not a big fan of adding unnecessary comments, explaining things that you can understand by just reading the code. But in our case, when working with Webflow projects, we encounter a lot of situations where we need to explain the context of what's happening. Like somebody who's going to read the code needs to understand the full context of it. So the comments in the code for that are a very good idea. And at the same time, every code base we deliver it with a README file that contains documentation properly organized with different sections. If there is specific, imagine that we build a tool for integrating a third party service. Like if you want to, I don't know, HubSpot. I'm making this up right now. But if you want this form to submit to HubSpot, you need to do X, Y, and Z. You know, so you create a small documentation that explains that, so the client can see it. And you don't need any specific tools. You can put that in the code base. You can put that on a Notion doc if you feel that it's better. You can put it in the client's own platform if they have one. I always prefer to put it in the code base because everything is together in the same place. Um, but we don't have any specific other recommendations aside from that. Just make sure that you're documenting everything as much as you can.
Now, what about to a marketing team? So that flow sounds nice to hand it off an application to a development team, but let's say we're handing it off to a marketing team, and I could see that document being more of a don't touch this, don't
Mm-hmm.
don't delete these items, be careful with this. So would
Mm-hmm.
that also be in a Notion doc when you're trying to give this documentation to somebody completely non-technical?
I don't know if we have any preferences for that. Perhaps what, because I mean, if it's something that you're delivering to a non-technical team who's just going to live in Webflow, perhaps a good idea is to use the draft pages like the style sheet. Also use the comments that you can add in the CMS. You know, you can add descriptions. Perhaps you can use some CSS classes. You know, if there's an element that should never be deleted at all costs, perhaps it's a good idea to put a CSS class that says, please do not delete me, you know, things like that. I think that the documentation should be adapted to the end user, as you said. um, if they're going just to live in Webflow, put everything in Webflow. If it's a technical team who's going to receive the code base and maintain it, put the documentation there. You know, think of the end user. um I had something that I wanted to say and I just forgot after your question.
Okay, I'll go one
uh
more thing while you remember that.
yeah, go
So
ahead.
this comment goes right in line with one source of truth, not having multiple sources of truth. That
Mm-hmm.
if you're delivering an application to a team that is working in Webflow, keep that documentation in Webflow. I love the style guide method. That there should be a style guide, maybe one that has the CSS styles and one that has technical documentation. That team
Mm-hmm.
will be in Webflow, so keep the information in Webflow. If you're handing it off to a team that codes, keep that in the code, right? Because they're going to be in the code. They'll be looking in the code as the primary source for getting that documentation. So, really, the documentation comes down to who you are delivering it to and making sure that you cater that documentation to that person. It's great, right? And that can even be video. If you're working with a marketing team, the marketing team may not want to read technical documentation. They may want a 1 minute video that says, hey, when working with this form, make sure you're aware of this, this, and this. Have a great time editing.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is, you really have to think about this. And you can ask these questions in the beginning of the project, when you're speccing the project, when it's just a lead. These are impressive questions. Hey, lead, I know that you'll want to manage this, and I want to create documentation like this. Here's a past client that we've created documentation for, and look how organized all of this stuff is. We'd love to create this documentation for you and charge you for it. And you'll want to pay for it because it's so awesome. This is the mentality. And
Mm-hmm.
when you really show that you can cater the documentation for that end user, people will want to pay for it. And this is now a new line item. So,
Yep.
something to be aware of.
Yep. Good point. I remember my thought that I had, but it was related to, so even though we're telling you try to document every difference that you're finding between platforms. Try to make sure that you're not splitting the logic. Well, first of all, focus on not splitting the logic at all. If you can avoid it, it's going to be easier for everyone. Perhaps you will have to do a little bit extra coding because maybe it was simpler to just put something in Webflow, like a random embed with some logic in there. But you need to think on people who's going to maintain the project after you. What's the best way of making this simpler to understand? Smart code, it's not the best code. The code that is the best, it's code that other people can understand. So don't try to be smart by saying, okay, I know a lot of Webflow. I know that if I just put an embed up there and I delete a specific element, then I will avoid having this behavior from Webflow. Don't try to be smart like that. Just try to make sure that you're making things simple and that people can understand it, and everything is just documented, as we said. um
This is a
I had a
mentality
couple
of client
more.
first.
Yeah, it is. It
This
is
mentality of
100%.
just think about who's going to be in the project next, whether it's another developer, a non-technical client, and just try to build this as simple and clear as possible. So when someone comes in the project, they are not confused. And this mentality, it goes right in line with the technical stuff we're talking about today. So yeah, this is important. We have 3 minutes left, Alex. So what is the most important stuff we can give in 3 minutes?
uh I have more things that I wanted to discuss, and I don't know if it's worth it opening up for 3 minutes. Perhaps we could just plan another stream, but things that maybe I can tell you things that I wanted to still discuss. The first one, it's about tips on how to use Waffle native components, because one of the things that we've said is we're using the platform. There are many, many times that you don't need to build something from scratch when you can use a component from Waffle or something that Waffle provides, which doesn't align much with what we just discussed about having split logic. But that's why it's important to have documentation and making sure that you're not over engineering stuff. There's always this balance. But for example, form logic, when we're building multi-step forms, we use a tabs component. you know this is something that it's very useful because the client just has this tabs component and they can navigate through all the different steps of the form thanks to the native tabs component. So this is something that perhaps we can talk about in another stream. Another thing that I wanted to talk about is security. When building custom projects in Webflow, you need to understand that Webflow is a full front end platform. Everything that you're coding is front end based. It's like a static generator. It just generates something, HTML, CSS, spits it out for you, and that's it. And you're working on the front end. So there's a topic about security that we could tackle also in another stream. Another thing that I wanted to mention is about collaboration tools. Because when you're working with a complex project, what you want to do is make sure that you're using the right tools. You want to use Git to keep the code history and maintain all the version changes and work with a team. Maybe you want to use a ticketing system, something that allows you to manage issues, to manage bugs, to manage new features, to manage deliveries. Maybe you want to use a specific platform to communicate with the client. So that's another topic that we could tackle another time. Also, testing. Testing, it's a full topic. So every time that the client publishes the project, there's the small chance that something broke, right? Maybe they deleted that element that you told them to not delete, but they still did. Testing is a big part also of big complex applications. So that's also another topic that we could have. And I'm seeing that we will need like 5 different streams to talk about all of that. So everyone who's here, just stay with us in next streams because we have still a lot of information to give. So yeah, I
Well,
don't think it's
there's
worth starting anything else for now.
I think there's when oh, am I still here?
Yep, we are listening your computer's mic, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I'm back. Good, Mike. Okay, so there's unlimited topics that we cover with technical. Moving forward, we're going to try different things. We're going to try live building, and then we're going to try this kind of talking over things concept. This
Hmm.
episode was really like a friendly conversation about managing web apps. And a lot of these topics were very simple. However, we see all the technical people in this chat are saying, that's great advice. That's really nice to think about in that way. That these simple topics, building really smart in Webflow is building in a simple way. And I really feel that we touched on that. The whole episode was really about these simple concepts of documentation, making sure you're using the right selectors to communicate the elements with the JavaScript. So yeah, I guess I'm saying I'm just happy how this came. This was almost like a podcast type episode for me. So if you like this topic, if you like what we're talking about, give the thumbs up. We're seeing a lot of activities on these technical streams during the live and also after the live. So we're going to continue doing them for as long as people are watching. Next week, we're going to do a live build type episode where we're going to start with something and finish it at the end of the stream. So I don't know exactly what it is, but we're just going to test a lot of different methods here. And yeah, I don't know what it is. We kind of figure out the topic a few days before, and then we just run with it.
we have a we have a build list of things that we would like to build. So yeah,
We do.
and if you
We
provide
do.
ideas, please do. Just ask us any questions. Also be aware that every single comment that you leave in YouTube during the stream and also after, we read them. We get ideas from there. So if you have
Yeah.
any question, any doubts, any something that you would like to see being built live, just ask it. Go ahead, drop a comment,
Yeah.
say something, and we will do it because
And
we're up. No, no, go ahead, go ahead.
yeah, let's bring up from Magic and Nexus. Can we do a live stream about managing a mono repo project library for Webflow, please?
Yeah,
So yeah, this is what I'm talking about, or what Alex is talking about, what we're both talking about. Tell us what you want us to do. This kind of seems like the live build version, the live build part
yep.
of this show. So yeah, we're trying different content. Tell us what you want, and really, we appreciate you coming back every Friday. We we see that there's different viewers on Friday. This is like a different crowd of people than our normal Tuesday and Thursday following. So yeah, big thumbs up. Thank you so much for coming. Alex, any final comments to the audience for today?
Thank you for being here. See you next Friday.
Thanks. Everyone, have a great weekend.